So I've just got to be careful that I don't say like what you were saying last.
That was, I knew exactly where I was going to cut. It would have been fine. So Craig, I mean, take us back again here. You grew up as a Jehovah's Witness in New Zealand, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about that.
So my mum studied with the witnesses when I was a little tiny kid. So I think I really had a really strong awareness of God, from a really little age, whether that was the witnesses or whether that was just me, who knows. But I definitely remember that. Grew up in the witnesses. My mum didn't really participate fully in it. And mum and dad got divorced when I was 7, and she, about within a year, or probably just over a year, she got together with another guy, and he moved in, and he wasn't a nice man at all. So I think because of that, I would have been about 10 years old or 11 years old, and I was like walking down to the Kingdom Hall, which was just down the road, to go to the meetings, and I think partially it was because I was definitely really a believer, but I think also it was a kind of escape from home, a rough home life.
Okay.
So that was all good, and yeah, mum kind of got baptised into the witnesses maybe by the time I was about 14, but she used to hate the door-to-door work and all that, so she was kind of in, but not 100%. And I was kind of going all on my own a lot of the time.
Really? So you took an initiative to go to church by yourself at that time?
Yeah.
So, when did you feel, or did you feel a conflict between, church going and being a gay man? At what point did you kind of say, wait a minute, this isn't going to work?
Yeah. Well, I definitely, I remember being really, really little, way pre-pubescent, and knowing that, all the other boys were crushing on girls, and I was crushing on, boys, and, I was always dreaming of being the princess, rather than the prince.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't have language for it because the witnesses are such a not cloistered entirely, but they are very, very, they only know other witnesses, and you only know their stuff, and there's a whole lot of stuff that you don't watch on telly, and so I didn't have language for it. But by the time I was 16, definitely, I knew that there was something really wrong with me, and I had a best friend. We were best friends, and we kind of had come out to each other post 16, but there was never anything funny going on between us. But we definitely were talking about the fact that we knew that we were attracted to men. And when I was 16, the witnesses have this huge thing, especially back, well, no, they do even now, but back in those days, Armageddon was literally a couple of months around the corner. Armageddon was imminent. Mm-hmm. I was quite a talented kid with music, I was good at karate and all that stuff. And, I remember at kind of 14, 15, being told, well, you can't do karate because that's violence. You can't go to university, higher education is frowned on by the witnesses. So, there's no point in going to university because their whole kind of theology is that if you get higher education that it can lead you away from the religion. So they were, and being a concert pianist or something like that, would mean that I was glorifying myself and not glorifying Jehovah. So that kind of mentality affected me. And so when I was 16, I was like, well, I can't go to uni or anything, and Armageddon's coming around in a couple of months. Armageddon's going to be here. So I thought, I'll go and knock on doors full time. That was the thing that we all used to do, was, if we could go knocking, do the full-time preaching work. So I did that, and I remember at that stage, I was also hoping that would make my same-sex attraction go away.
So at an early age in your teenage life, you were obviously aware that you were attracted to men, but you were also wishing it would go away.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you think that affected you, and how did that affect let's say your relationship with God?
I'm not quite sure about my relationship with God at that point. I think a lot of guilt, a lot of personal shame, but I think that didn't really kind of kick in until a little bit later, really full on. Mm-hmm. But definitely a lot of self-hatred. Definitely a lot of self-hatred because of it. And
just asking yourself, why am I like this, or why do I feel this?
No, I didn't ask why. I just begged God to take it away.
Okay.
I just wanted to begged Jehovah to take it away, and I thought by preaching full time that at least I might make it through Armageddon. But there'd been a couple of incidences, physical incidences that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was, gay. But and then around the age of 18, this Watchtower article came out about homosexuality. And when that Watchtower article came out, it was kind of the first time that I had language.
Right. So for those that may not know, Watchtower is the publication for the Jehovah's Witnesses.
And it was kind of the first time that I had language to there was stuff in black and white that I was like, oh, this is what's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. So I went to the elders and told them that, I went with this magazine, and it was all kind of a bit dramatic, and I was in tears and all that. And I said, this is what I am. And they very quick. So this was like 1981 in a small town in New Zealand, in New Plymouth in New Zealand. So the elders really didn't know what to do about it. They pulled together a judicial committee, and I was stripped of all my privileges of being a full-time preacher and being able to comment in meetings and stuff like that. So
how did that affect you?
Oh, it was devastating. It was devastating. So I knew that it was on the cards that I'd get disfellowshipped, and with the witnesses, if you get disfellowshipped with the witnesses, you literally lose your whole world. Nobody talks to you. They walk down the street and look at you, look straight through you. So I was devastated. I knew there was a high chance that I'd be disfellowshipped and I would lose my world. I didn't know anyone in the outside world. I only knew witnesses in my immediate family. So it was a huge thing. And like the elders said to me, look, we'll get back to you in a few weeks, a couple of weeks. And so a few weeks went by. And
so Craig, so at this point, you're basically outcast in a sense, right? I mean, you're feeling like you're outcast and
looking that way.
And you have a relationship with God and with religion. You're trying to do what's right. And here your world is crashing down on you.
Yeah.
And did you feel that there was no way out of this, or?
I was hoping that they wouldn't disfellowship me and that I would get help for my problem. Mm-hmm. But what happened was I never heard anything from them. In the meantime, my best friend, who had also self-identified, us with each other as being gay, we just cooked up this scheme. So it was basically, we just kind of went, we can't stay in the organisation and be faithful to Jehovah and bring reproach on Jehovah's name, and be gay. So we cooked up this scheme that we would come down to the capital city in New Zealand, which is about 5 or 6 hours away from my hometown. Plus things were really bad at home as well. So with my stepfather. So that was kind of another motivation for me to get out, because if my stepfather found out that I was gay, I'm pretty sure there would have been a lot of violence and a lot of, unhappiness. So I just said, I'm out of here. So I went down to Wellington. We were there for a few months, and, within kind of the first month, drugs were introduced, and I just said, yeah, sure. The mentality with, Jehovah's Witnesses is that if you're not going to be a witness, you're doomed anyway. And the world is a really, really bad place. There's no it's it's extremely black and white, Greg. If you're not a witness, you're on the devil's team.
Mm-hmm.
There's no grey areas.
Okay.
So, and they make the world out to be really bad. They make worldly people out to be really bad, all of them. So, when I moved to Wellington and there was, living with transsexuals, and it turned out they were into prostitution and they were into drugs. And I just thought, well, that's what the world is. That's what I was raised to believe the world is anyway. So,
why not?
If you can't beat it, join it. And, I think I had so much self-hatred that the drugs were a great answer initially, because at least they gave me some relief from my, head. So, so I got into drugs, and then, a few months went by, or somewhere along the line, I still had a lot of that self-hatred and stuff. And so I guess, because we were living with drag queens, I thought maybe the solution to my unhappiness and everything is to live as a woman. Maybe I'm just meant to be a woman, and that's my problem. And that kind of, I guess, coming from a witness background, it's kind of like, well, if I become a woman and then I get together with a man, well, then I'm not really gay because I'm a woman.
Right.
Yeah. In my
So your thought was, well, maybe this makes things right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And by then, I still believe that the witnesses were the truth. I remember saying to people, oh, no, the witnesses are the true religion. I know that I'm not living it, but they are the true religion.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I started living as a woman and was doing hormones, taking the hormones, in preparation for sex change and stuff. It was a very dark time of my life, and in some senses a very dark time, in some senses I was really looked after by the universe. I don't know, but and being in such a rough scene, I was really.
Why do you say that? I mean, why do you think you were looked after?
I guess in the long term, I think God has always had his hand on my life to some extent. I think that that potentially we could have been, picked on a lot and stuff like that. And I just happened to meet a group of older people that were into that scene and into the drugs, but they really took care of me and taught me how to look after myself. And, I did experience a little bit of violence, but we won't talk about that. But, I was very fortunate. It could have been much messier than what it was.
So where did that lead you to then? I mean, so you've gone to this really dark area in your life.
Yeah.
And, you're trying to fill what seems to me is that you seem to maybe be trying to fill a void that you've left behind, just because knowing you a little bit, I know that you've always felt, not always, but there's always been I think a sense with you, it may have been suppressed, but a sense of duty, of testimony of, God exists and I want to be doing what's right. You went to this dark area, and then that didn't last forever though, right?
No. So that it only lasted for about 3 or 4 years. I can't quite remember the age. So I'm 56 now, so it was a long time ago. Definitely by the age of probably 22, I went back to my hometown. And we were living, so I was still living the lifestyle, I was still doing the drug, but we were living in this place, and we were living next door to Pentecostal Christians. So these Pentecostal Christians befriended us, and they kind of, they said to me, look, Jesus can change you. Jesus, if you ask Jesus into your life, that he can change you, and that, Jesus loves you, and, Jesus. And, I was looking for an out in terms of especially drag. And I can remember a specific occasion where, like, I was 22 years old. I'd been doing this for maybe 4 years. I can specifically remember looking in the mirror one day and looking at this girl looking back at me. And even though I hadn't had the full change or anything, but, I physically looked female.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember specifically looking in the mirror going, you're everything that you want to be, and you still hate yourself.
Mm.
What's the point?
Sounds like you're trying to survive.
Yeah. So anyway, we lived next door to these Christians for 6 months. I wouldn't have anything to do with them because they were, of the devil, because they weren't Jehovah's Witnesses. But, eventually I got to know them, and, they seemed to really care for me. And I was really, I hadn't had that for a long time. So they eventually, cut a long story short, went to a church service, had this really full-on salvation experience, accepting Christ.
Mm-hmm.
It was like really full-on, and like I'm, in the Pentecostal sense, I met Christ that night, and to this day, I know that I met Christ that night. And
what does that mean to you? What does that mean to you? I mean, what was that experience?
Just that it was very, is the right word visceral? It was a very visceral experience. I experienced God as I'd never experienced God as a witness. I knew the reality of Jesus Christ, and I knew that he came into my life, and I was kind of changed
mm-hmm.
in that instant.
Okay.
And so, and getting out of, like the next day, I stopped wearing female attire and stopped doing drugs. When I first joined the church, the Pentecostal church, I'd gone in knowing that, you couldn't be gay. And back then, and I think they've changed. I think that a lot of the Pentecostals and evangelicals have kind of caught up with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints stuff around this now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think back then, and actually I think even the LDS Church was kind of like this back then too, was that you just couldn't be gay. You couldn't be gay and Christian. Yeah,
there's been definitely evolution of perspective there as well.
Yeah. So I knew that going in, but I was promised that Jesus would make me straight. If I did everything Jesus' way, that he would make me straight.
Okay.
So
and you believed it
completely,
mm-hmm.
because of this very real encounter that I'd had with Christ.
Sure.
I fully expected that it would change,
mm-hmm.
and stuff like the drugs just went very quickly. All that old lifestyle went very quickly. So I kind of expected the gay, my what you could the Americans call same-sex attraction, which I'm not that keen on, but I expected the same-sex attraction to go as well, and it kind of didn't go. I dated a girl for 18 months, and I just knew that I still was, it wasn't going. And I think the thing that the Pentecostals were saying at the time was that, being gay was a demon,
mm-hmm.
that, so like I was having this ministry called Deliverance Ministry, and was having the demon of homosexuality cast out. And I was doing a 12-step program for, homosexual behaviour. I was praying in tongues for hours on end and studying the Bible and not hanging out with gays. I was doing everything.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So you feel that you were completely bought in on this program and that you had a real hope.
Yeah.
Again, going back to what you said as a teenager, you had a real hope that you were going to be straight and this was going to go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it didn't.
No.
Okay. So what ended up happening then?
So I kind of battled it until I was 30, until about 30, 31. I really battled it.
So that's, what's that? Just interjecting here. Is that about 8 or 9 years?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I think
I was at the Pentecostal church when I was 22. So yeah, till about 30, 31, I left when I was 30 or 31.
Mm-hmm.
So in those intervening years, a lot of it was really good. But there was a lot, especially I think the last 2 or 3 years of it, this time had marched on and nothing was changing. And it was just becoming, so disheartening that nothing was changing. And, my relationship with the Lord would be, up and down. I'd be great for a little bit and then I'd, do something unfortunate.
Was that when you talked about before, Craig? You talked about guilt. Was that a part of this up and down? I mean, it was just like, okay, wait a minute, I feel really guilty about this. How can I have a normal relationship with God if I'm guilty about this?
Yeah. And there was to a certain extent, like people would tell my friends in the church would say to me, you're rebellious, Craig. You're not trying hard enough, Craig. You're, it was like, it wasn't God's fault that I wasn't going straight. It was I didn't really want to go straight.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was like, you guys have no idea,
It was being treated as if you were an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you talk about the 12-step program and it's like, look, we just need to change this through these steps, through prayer, and that was a common belief, right, at the time. I mean, that really was, I think, a very common belief.
Yeah, it was very much, I know since I've joined our church, even back then they were doing, and you guys, and I think we were doing in Christianity too. I think I didn't come across it in New Zealand, but is it aversion therapy or something?
I know that there were programs for that. I don't know if they were officially a part of the church, but I think that it was part of part of the recommendation and counseling to go to these programs.
Yeah. And, the other thing was, get married, get married and it'll go away. And, praise God that I didn't do that. I would have hate to have done that to a woman and wrecked her life.
That's an interesting point right there, because I think that did happen several times. And I think that's happened in a lot of faiths.
Yeah.
Right. And somehow, if I do this and I mean, coming from a straight person's point of view, right, I can see how people would start saying, look, if you marry a woman and you have kids and you're part of a family, you're a father, you're a husband, and you can love your wife and your kids, that maybe things will change.
Yeah. I mean, I think my views on that sort of stuff has matured as I've gotten older.
What do you mean?
With the rest of my story, I just think that it's quite a naive, view to take. And, it's kind of like saying to straight people, like, imagine if the world was reversed. Imagine if we lived in a gay world and, the straight people were the minority and, there was these people running around with, desires to have sex with the opposite sex, and we just said to them, well, you just pray enough and you just marry the same sex and everything will be good. It's like, imagine someone telling you to change your fundamental
I'm looking for your word, what you're going to give here.
Yeah, what's it called?
I want to know what word you're going to say, actually, because I'm really interested in this. Because
well, what's
go
it
ahead.
called? Oh, I can't remember what the word is.
Your identity, or
not quite, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your sexuality. You know, imagine if some, like, what I'm saying is
your orientation. Your
orientation.
There we go. Okay.
We can cut out all that other stuff. Yeah, you know, imagine someone saying to you, "Oh, Greg, by the way, we'd like you to change your orientation."
Yes.
How the heck does one do that?
Yeah,
How do
it's
you
not,
do that?
you know, that's, you know, I
It's
can say
not
personally that's not going to happen.
Yeah, you know, like, it's not a choice.
Right.
You know, we don't get to choose our orientation.
And see, that's the thing that I find is so fascinating is the wrong word. I use that word a lot, but that's the wrong word. This is in itself something so different and so complex.
Yeah.
Because it really is, you know, I don't understand how you feel the way that you do with your orientation. You probably can't understand how I feel the way that I do. It's such a major part of our identity. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Is our sexuality. Yeah. And so it's not just a matter of saying I'm going to change my behavior. Yeah. 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 Right. It's not, you're going down deep into somebody's core, into somebody's identity to say you're going to completely change. And so to me, it's different than everything else, any other type of behavior we might talk about.
And, you know, the other thing is, which is kind of jumping way ahead in this conversation, but, you know, I've been living, you know, celibacy for the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. My sexual identity and orientation is probably like these areas of my orientation that had nothing to do with sex.
Sure.
And yet that
it's part of you.
It's part of me. It's how I relate to men. It's how I relate to women. It's how I relate to the world, you know. And I ain't been doing, you know, anything. But yeah, that's kind of jumping ahead. But so anyway, yeah, so I was in the Pentecostal church and I was really trying hard with God, and got to 30, 31, and I was just kind of like, I can remember there was a kind of a few months where I was so low because things weren't changing. And, you know, I loved the Lord. I loved the Lord. Mm-hmm. I loved him with every fibre of my being. Mm-hmm. I wanted Christ in my life. And it was devastating for me too, for this not to work. It devastated me.
Well, understandably, and, absolutely.
You know, I'm not the suicidal type. Mm-hmm. I think if I would, I probably would have, but I'm just not. But nonetheless, it was devastating to me. But it also became really, really stressful. And there was a period where, like, I just had hives all down one side of my body, and I was not functioning. And there was some dark periods within myself. And just, you know, when I wasn't, I used to call it being with God and not with God, depending where my latest sin was. Mm-hmm. But, you know, those times, you know, when I couldn't feel the Lord or the Holy Ghost, they were really internally black, and it was awful. And I decided that I can't live like this anymore. It was too hard. And I also kind of like, I got really angry, you know, I got angry with God, and I was like, you know, why did you promise me that you would enable me to live how you wanted me to live? And I felt that I'd been lied to.
So there's really, I mean, you're going through a process there where, I mean, you know, again, I mean, it's your eternal salvation, it's your happiness, and there's no way to see how you're going to reconcile all this. Is that right?
Yeah.
How do you reconcile what you want for yourself to live a life that is worthy of Christ, right? That is worthy of God, and yet your nature says something completely different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I got totally fed up in the end, and I just said, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I walked away. I walked away from the church, and I walked away from God.
So,
And
so about 30, 31 years old, you walked away from the Pentecostal church and just kind of gave up on everything, or?
I literally, the last prayer I prayed at that point was that, God, I can't do this anymore. If being gay is so bad, I don't understand why you wouldn't make it easier to change. If you think that it's so bad, and I had a lot of friends, there was a lot of friends, we were all the same. We were all going through the same thing. There was ex-Christians, ex-gays for Christ. We were all doing the same thing. We would be able to do it for a few years, and then we were falling off like flies. And I just, so not only just my experience, but friends' experiences as well. And I just said, this isn't right. It's not right. And I just came to this conclusion that the whole religious paradigm that I'd been brought up with, from Jehovah's Witnesses to being 30, 31 and a evangelical Christian, that it was all just a big psychological have. It was just a big delusion. It was the
a delusion for everyone, or just a delusion for someone who's gay?
Nah, a delusion for everyone. Okay. That we were all sucked in.
So you became more of an agnostic or atheist, or?
Oh, vehemently atheist.
Vehemently atheist. Okay.
Yeah, I was so angry, and I probably wasn't vehemently atheist at the very beginning of it, but by a few years in, I was, so I left the church, came back to Wellington, had a good job down here, and I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to be the best gay person that I can be, because I was fed up with being told that, that we're dirty and that we're filthy. And, what used to really brass me off was when, people would put us in the same category as child molesters and animal thing, or murderers or thieves. It was like, that used to make me so angry, because, basically I was a good person. I went to work, I never stole, I never did anything. Quite boring, really. But, so I used to get, and I still do get, very angry if people do that routine of comparing us to, some things that don't involve two adults making a choice.
Right. Yeah, you saw being compared to people that make choices as compared to your nature. Yeah. And I just decided, and because I was raised in a world, until I was 30, I was basically in a world that was saying we were somehow less because we were gay. And I was over that. I was over that, and I'm still over it. So that just meant basically just being a good human being, but being proud of who I am and loving myself. And, those years of, from 30 until, basically after 50, so for 20, 25 years, I just, I did the best that I could to live life. And so, Craig, so you become a vehement atheist for a time, and then is this, then there was a time when you were open again to spirituality, at least.
Yeah. So when I was, 2000, the year 2000, I did rehab. I went into rehab in 2000, and rehab, those good old 12 steps turned up on the wall of rehab, but in the context of alcohol and drugs. And I was, and of course God's in the steps, and I was like, oh no, I was so brassed off. I was like, oh no,
because God was a part of the rehab.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I was like, no way, man, I'm not doing that. But, thankfully I had this amazing drug and alcohol counselor. And, he said to me that, in the context of the 12-step fellowships, God can be whatever higher power you want for yourself. There's no conditions on what or who you have for higher power. If you want to have a tree as a higher power, that's fine. If you want to have the recovery program as a higher power, that's fine. If you want to have God, that's fine. Yeah.
So you go through the 12-step program in rehab,
Yeah.
and where did that lead you?
So that led me to, basically I needed to find some kind of spiritual path that was going to work, but, and I didn't want to do the theist, Christian or any other kind of God path.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of, basically made stuff up.
Okay.
I made up that, the world is fundamentally a good place. I think that was important, especially from my witness background. Mm. I mean, even the evangelical background with this, silly, one thing I never understood was the whole heaven and hell, black and white thing. I never really understood that. So, that the world is fundamentally a good place, that people are fundamentally good. Just some of us are more damaged than others, but, and that worked. A little bit of meditation and stuff, kind of just closing my eyes and zoning out and stuff. But so I think I'd been in recovery for like a year and a half, and I went to Australia and I came across I got introduced to this Buddhist, I came across a Buddhist book, and I read this Buddhist book, and the Buddhist book kind of like really aligned with a lot of the stuff that I'd started thinking about, the interconnection, between people and life and the value of life and the sanctity of life. Kind of lots of stuff in Buddhism really resonated. Plus I really liked it because A, there was no God.
Because what?
There was no God.
Oh, because there was no God, right.
And B, they didn't give a toss about people being gay or LGBT. Mm-hmm. So that worked really well for me.
Okay.
So, and it just really kind of resonated with what I'd already come to believe for myself. So I felt like I wasn't being told what to believe by other people. It was just resonating with what I already thought.
Right. So being told what to believe by other people then was probably associated with you need to change, right?
And I'm bad because I'm gay.
Yeah. Okay. So So you're with. How long were you practicing Buddhism then?
15 years.
15 years. Okay. So for quite some time then, and you enjoyed it.
Loved it.
Loved it. Okay. So it was it was at least something that brought you some type of spirituality.
Yeah. So I think the main thing that I liked about it was the chanting was kind of like a way to, in some sense, a way to get back into prayer. Mm. And that I really loved that. Like I really, yeah.
Okay. So you're as we go through your journey here, so you've gone, just recapping real quick, you've gone from a very strict ideology or theology with Jehovah's Witnesses growing up. Yeah. You move to a dark place in your life, you kind of rebound off of that. Yeah. And then you rebound back a little bit. You're kind of brought back in with the Pentecostals. Yeah. Into a born-again evangelical type of relationship. And then you go kind of the opposite again, and you become a vehement atheist. Yeah. Right? You're like, okay, I've tried this again. Maybe, now this isn't working. And now you find maybe something that's maybe a little more middle ground with Buddhism. Yeah. Right? A little more.
Way. Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got something that can provide some type of spirituality, some kind of connection, awareness and context. And is this now you'd been 15 years as a Buddhist.
Yeah.
And then you start seeing something online about the church, or?
So initially, for about a year, I discovered YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching, there's a very strong community of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses online and on YouTube. And I think the thing about us ex-witnesses is that, because we've been so damaged and because of the shunning practices of the witnesses, we're very, it's, and also I think because of the extreme nature of the witnesses themselves, that, so the ex-J-Dub community is very quite strong and quite vocal, and so I came across them on YouTube and started watching various stuff about ex-J-Dub. So I started watching this stuff, and then at the same time I was watching that, somewhere along the line, one of the ex-witnesses did an interview with John DeLynn and was comparing ex-Jehovah's Witnesses journeys
from Mormon stories.
Yeah, with the Latter-day Saint stories, Mormon stories. So I was introduced to John DeLynn on that podcast, and I just thought that it was really interesting. There's always this kind of comparison between the witnesses and Latter-day Saints, I guess because of the door knocking and the suits.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to a certain extent, the witnesses have a governing body, and we have the apostles and the prophets. So
there's a hierarchy in place.
I thought I'll check out this Mormon story. So I started watching Mormon story, watching Mormon stories. And I just found it really intriguing. Like, sociologically, I thought that it was really intriguing. Like, ex-Latter-day Saints experiences and ex-witnesses experiences are really quite different.
In what way?
There's a lot. So for Latter-day Saints, there's much more wiggle room for you in terms of, you can question stuff, or you can believe things a little bit differently than what the brethren teach, or you can,
just to interject real quick, that's interesting to me, because you will find some people that would not agree with that, but they probably have no context.
Yeah.
Right. So in other words, someone who's been a Latter-day Saint and they feel for whatever reason they leave the church. It may be that if that's all you see, if you're a member of the church and you only see somebody who's left the church, and maybe you've watched Mormon stories or listened to it, and you hear somebody leave the church, what you're saying is that if you were to go out and watch, say, for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses and those that are ex-JWs, as you say, you would see quite a difference in the response, even, from those that have left being a Jehovah's Witness and those that have left the LDS Church.
Yeah. And I think the way that Latter-day Saints can interact with, like, all you have to do in the witnesses is pick up a cigarette and you can be disfellowshipped.
Mm-hmm.
You can lose your whole family.
It's very, very strict.
We can fiddle about with the word of wisdom and have different expressions of how we live the word of wisdom, and people go, well, that's kind of up to you. I mean, I know that. Yeah, and even even if you slightly question things in J-Dubs, you are in hot water very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I've noticed with Latter-day Saints that people can question things, and there's much more kind of latitude to,
I'm glad you're saying that. I just because I do have discussions with people sometimes. And again, I mean, if you don't have any context with this, the church it can be strict, and it can be, I don't know if I'd say this way or the highway. I guess sometimes it is, but But at the same time, the process and the culture that's in place should allow you a little bit of wiggle room, like you say, and the ability to, you're not shunned, you are hopefully helped out, right? You've got an arm put around you, hopefully. I don't know that everybody always sees it that way.
No, and I think that's not always the experience on the ground either.
And it's not always the experience. That's correct.
I've heard of this thing, bishop roulette.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a bishop that is really cool, and you can get a bishop that's not so cool.
Right, right. There's always a human factor in place.
Yeah. Whereas with the witnesses, you're in hot water pretty quickly for just about anything.
Okay.
So anyway, I wasn't interested. Like, I was never interested in becoming a Mormon. Mm-hmm. I was only interested in it from a sociological point of view. Mm. But what happened was, in the process of kind of fixating on Mormon stories for a few months, he did some interviews with LGBT people and their experience in the church.
Okay, that was probably pretty interesting to you.
That was really interesting. Right. And so I think one of the main, there were a lot of those interviews where, like, I'm gay, actually there was several ways of it, but two of the main ones was, one of them was, this kind of story of the kid a teenager comes out to his or her parents, and they go, well, we're going to love you anyway. And even if you go outside the circle of our doctrine, we're still going to love you, mm-hmm. which was just trippy for me, because I was.
So that's not something you were used to hearing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, one of a hugely influential was Carolyn Pearson. Carolyn mm-hmm. Pearson's story. Her story, oh my gosh, I just blubbered through that one. Because, her husband, and, they'd gotten married in the 70s. He never told her he was gay, because his bishop said, don't, just get married and you'll be all good. Of course, mm-hmm. he wasn't all good. He ended up leaving and, got HIV, came back, and Carolyn nursed him in her home mm-hmm. until he died. And that, like, I just couldn't believe the love, I was just amazed, and then there was the odd stories, and I think through Mormon stories, I think I might have gotten into these other things like Mormon and Gay, which is an official church website. Mm-hmm. Also, there's one called Voices of Hope.
Yes.
And their videos, I was watching theirs as well, and they were about people that, like, were identifying as gay and staying in the church, mm-hmm. and, like, I was like, wow.
Okay, yeah. What's that like? And, so you were interested that, okay, here's a religion that is, they're not saying, okay, it's okay to have same-sex behavior, but it's okay to be gay.
Yeah.
Right. Is that what you were interpreting?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And that there were people that were saying publicly, that's probably a big part of it, right? Publicly, mm-hmm. we still love you no matter what. And you're not, because that's obviously, this is a person by person case. That's not always the case with everybody, but at least there were people that were acting different than what you had experienced in the past with Christianity.
Yeah. And I just found that utterly fascinating. I was just like, what the heck? So I kind of was probably watching Latter-day Saints. So what happened was, also in this process, of course, with Mormon stories, I also came across all the reasons why people were questioning their faith crisis, the reasons why they were having faith crisis, different versions of the first vision, polygamy.
Right. So you're starting to get brought in a little bit into this Mormonville online. right? Where you're
And I was
seeing
like,
what
wow.
the issues are and
Yeah.
what testimony means and
Yeah. And so like I found that really, really fascinating, and so through that process, I just kind of thought the whole thing was just rather fascinating
mm-hmm.
from a sociological point of view. The state's still not interested in being a Latter-day Saint.
Mm-hmm.
What did happen though, somewhere along the line, I did start having a sneaky suspicion, like, it really appealed to me, these stories of people that were staying in the church and being a faithful Latter-day Saint and having a relationship with the Lord and keeping their gay identity.
Mm-hmm.
Not doing the behavior, but keeping their identity. Like
right.
that not an issue.
Yeah, it's public and it's out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I think somewhere along the line, I just went, God, I think I kind of went, wow, this God that I've rejected and that I don't believe in and that I think is a big have, what if I'm wrong? Like what if there's a way back?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so I kind of started getting, I kind of started thinking, this is really interesting. So I ended up going to a Latter-day Saint sacrament meeting.
Now, had you seen also, you talked about the faith crisis online before you had gone to church here. You started seeing some of the apologetic stuff. From the church also.
Yeah,
because it's really fascinating to me. So you're talking about what you saw that's fascinating on your end. What's fascinating to me is that you get online and what someone who would be, let's say, a lifelong member of the church, where it might be something where it starts to cause a faith crisis to them, right? Because they're seeing discussions that are outside of what they would have maybe with their family or within the church at Sunday school or seminary or institute.
Yeah.
But that for you was kind of this middle ground of, or this invitation into this whole new world that actually started to bring you an interest in the church.
Yeah.
You know, so some people are going down that path and it's starting to maybe cause a faith crisis. For you, it's almost like it's something that's starting to give you some faith.
Yeah, I think I got a bit. I think because I was only interested in it sociologically, and there was somewhere along the line where I got a hint that there was other sides to the arguments.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you see all the like Book of Mormon issues, historicity and horses and
right.
all that stuff.
All these really important things. Right.
Yeah, and but because I was only interested in it sociologically, from an intellectual level, I think it was kind of easy for me to go, oh, wow, these guys are saying all this stuff. I wonder what the other team says. Mm-hmm. So and somewhere along the line, I've been introduced to Thea Mormon.
Okay.
And so I started looking at, Dan Peterson and, all those guys, and like looking at their stuff. And I was kind of like going, okay, so there's kind of like a whole kind of different side of the story here, and you kind of can, you can kind of go, you can look at all, and that's what I find interesting about the internet is that, a little bit like in the old days, you could make the Bible say whatever you wanted it to say.
Sure.
These days, you can look at the net and find whatever you want to find, and you can, for you Americans, you can just look at the Democratic stuff, or you can just look at the Republicans. I think you've even got, is it CNN and the other one? Like
CNN
one's
and
more
Fox News?
Yeah, one's right-leaning and one's left-leaning.
Right, yes.
You can just watch the left-leaning
just preach to the choir.
Yeah, and so I was kind of like going, wow, this is kind of cool. So I started looking at all the other stuff, and the other stuff I was just kind of like, okay, so I think it's just as relevant to you kind of get I think you watch both sides a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think I kind of like just started seeing, you know, for me to not immediately go read an article about, I don't know, Joseph Smith being a whatever they say he is, but, you know, instead of just saying that, going, well, okay, but what does the other team say about him?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I think I just started seeing the arguments as much more nuanced than what is just presented to you. You know, so that was all good. Went to the sacrament meeting because I wanted to find out. So this was the first time I met. So I'd been looking at this stuff for maybe 2 years, 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I eventually went to the sacrament meeting because I kind of wanted to know. I kind of mainly had questions like what's a stake and what's a word of wisdom and, you know, kind of things, stuff like that.
Sure.
And I also wanted to know, like, is it true what they say about the gays on the ground here? Or is it just what's on the net?
So did you go to sacrament meeting to was it a kind of a test? It's like, I'm gonna try this out myself.
I just wanted to be nosy.
Okay.
I was literally being nosy, and I thought I'll talk to the missos and see what they say. So I asked them, like, I can remember I asked them some really dumb questions. Well, they seem pretty dumb now. But, like, one of them was Filipino, and I said, oh, why would you be in a church where they don't let black people go to the temple? You know, or they have a past of not letting the black people go to the temple, because I thought, oh, maybe. Because my view of the church was kind of like it was all pretty much white. And then I turned up to the sacrament meeting in New Zealand here. 90% of the congregation is Māori and Pacific Island.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That does not surprise me at all.
Yeah, I was so relieved because I was like, I didn't really want to go to a whitey church because they're a bit boring. But yeah, I was so relieved that my peeps were there. So that was huge. But I can remember saying to one of them, oh, why are all you guys coming to a church where they've got this racist background? You know, and you know, the other question, one of the questions was, okay, so what about the gays? You know, they didn't know.
So did you ask Maori attendees there, Maori members there, these questions?
No, just this Filipino missionary.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I met any of the congregation at that meeting. So I talked to the missionaries for about an hour and asked them all my nosy questions, told them I wasn't interested in being a Latter-day Saint, and they wanted my address and phone number, and I said, no, that's fine. I just came to be nosy. I'm sorry to waste your time. And they were fine. They were lovely. And one of them had gay mates.
Did you go by yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of them was Australian, and he had gay mates back in Australia. And I was really impressed with that. I was like, wow, okay. So I left that meeting, and then after that thing started.
You're still really at this point. I mean, this is just a couple of years ago. You're still really in
2016,
this idea of just absolute black and white. Right? When you say you're impressed by somebody who has gay friends that's going to church here, I mean, you're like the world is completely separated here. Yeah. So I was pretty. So I came home from that sacrament meeting, and I think kind of running parallel with this was my Buddhist faith. My Buddhist faith was. There was stuff going on, and I like to think that God was just working quietly in the background. But there was something going on with my Buddhist faith, and it was kind of like becoming less. It wasn't working for me as well as it had in the past. But it was kind of fine, but it was kind of not fine. And so after I came back from the sacrament meeting, but of course by this stage I knew that the deal was you get the Book of Mormon and you read the Book of Mormon and you ask if it's true. So I think I definitely, after coming back from that sacrament meeting, I definitely was obviously looking at stuff through slightly different eyes, and I kind of thought,
I definitely can remember thinking, I wonder if perhaps if they're right, and this is only an if, could this be a way for me to come back to God? Like, could I get God back in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And so I jumped online and ordered a Book of Mormon. And I think I ordered the missionaries at the same time to come around. You can do it all online. It's great. But and I think I was talking to a missionary sister online as well. So this Book of Mormon arrived in the post, and I remember the first time I opened it up, and with Buddhism,
just curious, when it arrived. I mean, honestly, go think back to it. It arrived, and you opened up whatever, the box or package, and I mean, what were you thinking right then? It's like, I've got this in my hand right now. What were you thinking at that time?
I think I was kind of thinking, oh, okay, it's arrived. Well, it's all right. It's either a load of nonsense or there'll be something in it. I was prepared to. I was prepared to kind of do what they said that you do, was to read it and think. And I was in this real habit with Buddhism, of doing morning prayers, and you do that twice a day. So that was, for me to just include in that time, read the Book of Mormon and pray to God. So I remember the first time I prayed to the Lord when I got my Book of Mormon, and I literally said, well, if there's anyone out there listening, and I'm not 100% sure that there is, but if there is, feel free to make yourself known.
So you prayed?
Yeah.
How long had it been since you had prayed to God?
25 years.
What I would imagine there would be a lot of anxiety, or maybe not anxiety, but what were you? Again, you're starting to think that there's a way to bring God back in my life. Are you thinking to yourself, maybe things are different than I thought, and maybe God is different than I thought? And you're kind of putting your toe in the water, so to speak, at this point.
Yeah. And there was also a big part of me that was going, Craig, you're crazy. You're just trying to get back to how you used to feel when you were a Pentecostal, because you're kind of like longing for youth. You're like having a midlife crisis, and you're longing for your youth. Sure. So, and that I was just having a hankering to go back, and that it was all a bit stupid, really. But there was also a tiny part of me that went, yeah, but just imagine if it was true. Wow. So I did that, and the first time it was just kind of like, oh, yeah, whatever, and I started reading the Book of Mormon. So I started doing that, and then interestingly, my chanting, so over the course of the next few weeks, I think the missionaries turned up. I got the missionaries to come round, and I was extremely lucky with my missionaries. They were just, maybe all converts say this, but they were perfect for me. And so they started coming around, and I was reading the Book of Mormon, and I think especially having the missionaries in the house and having the discussions, I think that definitely, I can kind of remember the first time I think that I felt the Spirit. Like the first time I can remember I was reading the Book of Mormon and I was praying, and I can remember this kind of different feeling came into me. And it was good, and I was kind of like, oh.
So different from what you had felt with the previous churches, and different from Buddhism?
Yeah. Maybe not, like I knew that it was I don't know how to describe it. I knew that it was a touch from God. I don't know whether that's the right thing to say. I knew that it was not me. And I knew that it was something good, and I knew that it kind of stayed, and it got. So the more that I read the Book of Mormon and was praying each morning, it got stronger, and my enthusiasm for Buddhism and my chanting in particular was becoming more erratic, and like I'd like quickly zoom through the Buddhist prayers, and so I could get to my Book of Mormon reading.
So how often were you reading the Book of Mormon?
Oh, twice a day.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so morning and evening. And I was also reading, just in case Mormonism was a cult, I was also reading the New Testament just to cover myself. Actually, in the Old Testament.
Insurance. Scriptural insurance.
I'm a bit of a nerd, Greg. You know, studying reading isn't a problem for me.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's where being an addict comes in handy. So it kind of got more, and it kind of culminated that I went to this Buddhist meeting I hadn't been for like a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
I went to this Buddhist meeting and they said, "Craig, can you lead the chanting?" And I said, "Yeah, all good." And I can remember sitting in front of our object of veneration that we chant to, and I can remember thinking, like, it was really seriously going, this isn't working for me. I think in our language that I have now, I was like, I don't have a testimony of this anymore.
Mm.
And so the next day I rang up my Buddhist leader and I said, "Jimmy, I need to take 6 months off my practice I've been investigating Christianity again, and I need to take 6 months out," because I thought kind of a couple of months before that, I was kind of thinking, oh, cool, you know, I can do a spot of chanting and a spot of Christianity and it'll be all, you know, sweet as. And it just became kind of probably more on a spiritual level, but realizing that I couldn't do that.
Mm.
And I just needed clarity. I needed some kind of clarity. So I thought, if I just take 6 months off Buddhism and concentrate on my scripture study and praying to God, that it would give me more clarity of whether this was a good path for me or not.
Mm-hmm.
So I made that call, and that was probably a real major taking off point. And so I kind of spent a week kind of getting in touch with my closest Buddhist friends and just saying, look, I'm going to take 6 months off. And then the other major thing that happened in that period, I think the missionaries started coming over in, I think, May 2017. And then by the time I got to July, I think I got up to Alma 32 in my Book of Mormon reading. Mm-hmm. And Alma 32 talked about, you know, taking the word and the seed and experimenting upon the word.
Right.
And so when I read that, I just love Alma 32. Alma 32 is my favorite. One of my favorites.
Great chapter.
Yeah. So I said to the Lord, the big test for me in any of this is, if I choose to live the law of chastity, how is that going to go? Because of my past. And because that was such a big thing in my life. Mm-hmm. So I made a commitment to the Lord that two things. I'd stop swearing, because I'm very enthusiastic swearing. That I'd stop swearing, and that I would start living the law of chastity. Mm. And that proved to be incredibly powerful. And I won't go into the details of that, but it took about a month. It was a process of coming to live the law of chastity completely. Mm-hmm. But over that month, there was incidences that happened that really confirmed to me not only that I could be empowered to live the law of chastity, but also that the Lord loved me, that the Lord knew me and loved me. Like, it wasn't like my past experiences with Christianity. Mm-hmm. There wasn't that kind of black and white separation between God and my orientation, okay, which was had a profound effect.
So you found at that point, I mean, as you made, I mean, an incredible sacrifice to live the law of chastity, you found maybe now somehow there's starting to be somewhat of a reconciliation then.
Oh,
is that what you're saying? I mean, you're you know, it's like, okay, Christianity, God, Jesus Christ can come back in here, and I can reconcile this. It's not perfect, maybe.
Yeah.
But I can reconcile who I am with who I want to be as far as being a child of God. I'm loved of God, and I can have that relationship with God.
Yeah.
Being who I am.
Yeah. Once the missionaries started coming, I was going to church. Like, I started going to church every week. And, you know, I've always been really, you know, I've always been out in my adult life, and I'm not even capable of being in the closet. And so, you know, and mind you, the missionaries blabbed before I even turned up that there was a gay guy sitting up. But you know, my ward is just, you know, but it's also amazing. Like, there's like 2 or 3 people in the ward that have gay family or gay kids, or yeah. So I think, you know, New Zealand is probably different to what it's like in the States in terms of being gay.
Right. Probably a little different.
I had bigger issues with my gay friends and my atheist friends and my Buddhist. No, not so much. Not so much the Buddhists. Actually, the Buddhists are great, but my atheist friends and my recovery friends and my gay friends, I had bigger problems when I joined the church with them than I did from, you know. And it was because.
Well, sure, you're going to them. You're going back to the dark side.
Well, yeah, and no, not even so much that. It's like, why would you join a church that doesn't let you be who you are, Craig?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know,
sure.
What the heck are you doing? No longer having sex.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with you? You know, like that. That it wasn't so much. Yeah, I had more issues with that sort of thing than, like, I took so much flack when I started being more out about joining the church and going back to God.
So also a big sacrifice for you. I mean, your circle of friends and people you know. I mean,
yeah. Although I only lost one friend.
Okay.
And that was kind of a semi-toxic relationship, so that was kind of okay anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But
so let me back up here, Craig, just real quick, because I want to finish this part of what you're saying here. So you're going to church, you're reading the Book of Mormon, you get to Alma 32.
Yeah.
And you've got the missionaries there, and your testimony is growing. You know, you're filling the Spirit. You're reading the Book of Mormon twice a day.
Yeah.
So what is the moment, or what happened? Where did they invite you to get baptized, or did you say, I want to get baptized? What happened there?
They were inviting me to get baptized from the beginning.
Sure they were. Of course they were.
Good missionaries. And I was always like, I'll wait till my 6 months is up and then I'll get back. If I want to, I said, I'm not against being baptized, just want to be really sure this time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to dive in and then 6 months later having trouble with the law of chastity or something.
Right.
I didn't want to go through that pain again. So I was just like, no. But then I think, especially once I started living the law of chastity, and I think God has been extremely gracious to me, and I know that you know. So a couple of things. One of them was I discovered that, you know, my orientation had less to do with my sexuality than what I thought it did. That a lot of my sexuality was based on lust rather than orientation.
Mm-hmm.
So when I found that I could live the law of chastity, that and like it was, kind of it very much became, it happened not overnight. Yeah, like that change from being a very lustful person to not really thinking like that anymore was for me truly miraculous. And I've, I had phases. I don't really think about it much anymore, but I had phases as well. Is it just because you're 56? And so, the urge isn't as strong as when you're 20.
Well, it probably would have been that much more difficult, though, at 26, right?
No.
Where you've got your life to live, and you got that 30-year difference there, and you're saying, can I do this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I don't know what I'd say to a young person. I don't know what I'd say to a person who was 20 or 25 and being presented with this task of living the law of chastity, because, for a heterosexual person, to live the law of chastity, at least, they've got the option of dating or holding hands or, exploring romance.
Sure.
With us at this stage of the church's history, we don't have that. If we're living the law of chastity, that's not just cutting out sex. Right. That's cutting out the hope of being with somebody.
Right.
So,
now let me ask you that then. I mean, that's a little personal, but how do you reconcile that? I mean, there's a lot that seems like it's been reconciled here, but how do you reconcile that?
To tell the truth, I'm not sure whether I do.
Okay.
If I've asked myself, why can't, my friends ask me as well, why can't you just be with God and be gay and just do what you want? Why, why can't you do that? And I don't know, I don't know. I don't know whether it's just because I was brought up so fundamentalist that I just, can never, I can remember I kind of had looked at those churches or gay churches that kind of totally accept, like do gay marriage and all that stuff. And I don't know, I don't know. I think this is just a path for me, and I choose not to have any opinion on people that choose to live a different path.
Mm-hmm.
I know that people, in the past have, they can't envision a life for themselves without being in a romantic relationship, and so they do choose to leave the church.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Christopherson's brother did it.
Yes.
He's returned recently, and his book's great. But I think the way that his family treated him
mm-hmm.
during those 20 years that he was away from the church or in a gay relationship is very educational for not only the church but for us as individuals. That our job is to love. Our job is not to make decisions for other people on to what path they choose. And this path that I've chosen, I want to be in relationship with the Saviour and with my Father in heaven. Mm-hmm. And I'm willing to pick up my cross, which is what I've chosen to do.
Okay.
But other people's crosses may look different.
They may. That's right. I think that's correct. So you have in your journey here, you decide you're going to go ahead and get baptized.
Yeah.
And you're going to make this commitment. You do this after you decided that you're going to live the law of chastity.
Yeah.
Okay.
So once I found out that I could live the law of chastity, I'm in. Mm-hmm. And also because the Lord is just becoming so, I just, for me, for a person like me, with my past to be able to have relationship. Like, I never believed that I could know my Savior like this. I it's like I wake up and pinch myself, thinking, how did this happen?
Right.
I just, just especially because I was so angry with him and so damaged by those, beliefs that I was intrinsically evil because I was gay. And so for me to be able to have the privilege of knowing the Saviour and being able to have the privilege of being able to partake of the sacrament every Sunday is like just, and to be able to go to the temple and make those covenants. And, if you'd said to me 3 years ago, I would have just said you were completely crazy.
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful thing, Craig. I mean, that's just, that is a wonderful, wonderful thing. You must have had also, as you were going through investigating the church, you must have had ward members there that you were able to get to know pretty well, that supported you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And probably a bishop that supported you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Completely. Yeah. So my missionaries were amazing. Like, especially we had some very, very difficult conversations while I was starting to live the law of chastity and stuff, and we had some very frank conversations, which looking back now, I feel so sorry for those poor boys. But anyway, but and then also with my bishop, just. Yeah, I don't think he's dealt with anyone like me knowingly that much before, but he turned out to be amazing. And ward members, and especially my elders quorum. Like, my elders quorum is just great. Like, I know there's probably a few of them that are kind of. I think sometimes in the elders quorum, like, some of them would just prefer not to think about it, which is fine. But I've also got like a few friends there. One of them, his dad was gay. He wasn't a member of the church or anything, but his dad was gay, and he's a great friend. But there's also at least 3 or 4 off the top of my head that, like, we're really, really close,
Right.
And I just love the elders quorum.
So where are you? So you've been baptized. This was over 2 years ago now.
Yeah, nearly October 28, 2017.
Okay.
2 years in end of October.
Okay, so almost a couple of years. And you've been able to go through the temple since then.
Yeah, so I went on December the 6th.
Okay.
Last year.
Yeah. Okay. And to go. How far is the temple from you, by the way?
Well, it's 7 hours drive from here.
Oh, so it's quite a way.
But ours is closed till 2021 for refurbishing. So I went over to Aussie and did it. So I'm desperate to get back to the temple, but
Okay.
Yeah.
And so tell me, just kind of wrapping up here a little bit, where are you at now with everything? I mean, it seems to me, in talking with you now quite a few times, you've got a really solid testimony.
Yeah.
Of Joseph Smith, of the Book of Mormon, of the Restored Gospel. And, it's, to me, overall, this isn't even a gay story to me, right? This is a story of redemption, right? It's a story of redemption to me, that you have this ability to be reconciled with God and to have, to be, somewhat at peace, and to have found the gospel and have a testimony of it.
I love that word reconciliation. It's one of my favorite scriptures. I think Paul said something about reconciliation. But I guess hey, I'm just doing life and trying to serve the Lord the best I can and grow to be the man that he wants me to be.
right now you've got a little bit of a platform here with this episode. What would you suggest that the church members, let's talk about the church members, that the church members know or get to know about being gay and Mormon?
I think first off is to love your children, and to love your children regardless of whether they stay or whether they go. Love your children and do not shun them.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I think one of my main things is that somehow, us as societies and us as particularly religious societies tend to view homosexual sexual sin somehow worse than heterosexual sexual sin.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's exactly the same.
Will you say that again? Say that again.
Us as religious societies tend to view homosexual sexual sin as somehow worse than heterosexual sexual sin.
Got it. Okay. You're saying they're both equally outside of the law of chastity. It's just...
Yeah. So, I often think, if I've got friends who are parents and their kids choose to leave the church because they want to live with their boyfriend or girlfriend, in a heterosexual relationship, are they going to treat that kid any different to their brother who chooses to leave the church and live with their boyfriend?
Right.
And if they do see a difference, then I think that's weird.
Okay.
The other thing is that I think people need to be informed as to what we actually teach now, because what the Brethren teach now is not what they were teaching 20, 30, 40 years ago.
And just summarizing, what are the Brethren teaching now?
So the Brethren are teaching now that you can be fully participating in all the ordinances and life of the church if you live the law of chastity.
Mm-hmm.
But also they're teaching that if people choose not to live outside the circle, as Richard Ostler says, live outside the circle of our doctrine, that it's our job to love them regardless, to show them the love of Christ regardless. And
where would be a good place to go and look up what the Brethren in the church are saying about this?
So there's a site, I don't know whether they changed the name of it, but there is a site called Gay and Mormon.
I think it's still the same.
Or Mormon and Gay.
Yeah.
Something like that. But it's that's the official church. That's an official church website. So you can look at that, and if you're worried about being anything slightly weird, then
it's mormonandgay.churchofjesuschrist.org.
Okay, yeah. So there's that. Also, Richard Ostler is just doing amazing work.
Mm-hmm.
He just interviews LGBTQ people, actually in other topics as well, but mainly those. And his site is called Listen, Learn and Love. And he just interviews people kind of like what you've done with me today.
Okay.
But, there's I think there's nearly 200 stories on there. And so I think just being, really informed and not being afraid, don't be afraid of LGBT people, like we're just people, we're just people. And, I think there's also a resource, although I think it's probably more for LGBT people themselves, but there's a group called North Star, and I'm not quite sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think they do have Facebook pages for families and friends. I'm not quite sure, but I know I'm a North Star, and there's a whole bunch of people in there that are in the position that I'm choosing to take and live the gospel.
Yeah, I'm seeing here it's northstarlds.org.
Yeah, I think they could be a resource, especially for people that perhaps are looking at trying to navigate this at a young age and finding it difficult to find a path. And I mean, look, at the bottom line is, I think that the Lord loves his children, and he loves, the most beautiful doctrine about, our church is that multiplicity of the glories, celestial and terrestrial and celestial. I think that's a beautiful, it's, the majority of people will end up somewhere where they're comfortable, and, it's not this, I don't think
it's not the black and white that you were used to.
Yeah, it's not the black and white that I was raised with, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Craig, I really appreciate you spending the time here and doing this. I think you've got a wonderful story, and like I said, I see it as a story of redemption and of covenant, of hope, and I hope that there are some people that would listen to this that have gone through maybe a similar path that you've gone through, that can see, okay, there can be some success with this. And no doubt it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult. It's a difficult situation. It's just, but I love hearing that you have made this reconciliation happen, or that the Lord has made this reconciliation happen with you, and that you can be right now in the position that you're in.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's the other part of it too. I think, a part of the grace of God is that, sometimes I feel that like he kind of like put me on hold until the church was ready for me.
Right.
I couldn't have been a part of this church 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah, maybe either being at that age or based on the policies at the time.
Yeah. So I think that our God is, he he's all knowing and all loving, and he loves us. He loves us.
Well, it also goes to the thought that I have, sometimes in my other podcast, I'll go through the idea of covenant. And apart from just being covenant between us and the Lord, right, there's covenant amongst us. There's covenant because people are different. And whether we're talking about different nationalities, different races, different religions, different levels of economic fortune, there's always going to be differences amongst us. And the idea for us to live by covenant is to build that bridge and understand what charity means between us. I don't think charity is possible, certainly not to the extent that it actually exists, without having the differences that we have amongst us.
No, exactly. Yeah. I think that's what makes what is it? Not variety. Well, variety is the spice of life, but it's
right.
our varieties, and we've been looking at that in Come Follow Me, with 1 Corinthians, and the body parts of the body of Christ.
Yes. Same idea. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think when you look at official church stuff, it's all very kind of slightly Pollyanna, presenting the best thing. I would love to see, the not so pretty sides of us be out there, because I think that's more real.
Right. There is a lot of Pollyanna in the church. There is.
Yeah.
I think that's, I think you kind of take that as part of the package, though, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe, not everybody's like that, obviously, but I think that maybe.
Yeah. And hey, look, I've become a little bit like that in the last 2 years. People say things sometimes, I'm like, you know, when I think 2 years ago, I would have been like, you know, yeah, it's kind of, was it in Jeremiah, I'll give you a heart of flesh in exchange for a heart of stone.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Craig, thank you very much. And is there anything else you wanted to say or that we haven't discussed or anything? Or
no, I don't think so. I just, love your work, love what you're doing. And we'll stay in touch anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But cool.
Yeah, contact me anytime.